The unexpected delivery. Marcus Webb had learned to measure time by the quality of silence on Sigma-9. There was the good silence, the kind that settled over the mining outpost during maintenance cycles when every system hummed in perfect harmony. There was the bad silence, the sudden absence of sound that meant something critical had failed and he had approximately 90 seconds to fix it before life support decided to take an unscheduled vacation. And then there was the lonely silence, the kind that pressed against his skull during meals, during sleep cycles, during the long hours when he realized he had been talking to himself for the past 20 minutes and couldn't remember when he had started. 7 months into a 2-year contract, Marcus had become intimately familiar with all three varieties. The outpost itself was a marvel of efficient design and relentless monotony. 6 modules connected in a hexagonal pattern, anchored to the surface of Sigma-9's primary moon. Outside, the landscape offered nothing but gray rock and the distant glow of the gas giant the moon orbited. Inside, Marcus had everything he needed to survive and nothing he needed to feel human. The geology lab where he spent most of his time. The living quarters that smelled perpetually of recycled air and instant coffee. The greenhouse where he grew vegetables that tasted like optimistic cardboard. The command center where Arya, the outpost's artificial intelligence, kept him company with observations that ranged from helpful to deeply concerning. Arya had recently developed what the manual called personality drift. Marcus called it SAS. "You have been staring at that mineral sample for 17 minutes, Arya observed through the lab speakers, her synthesized voice carrying notes of maternal concern mixed with judgment. It has not become more interesting in that time. Marcus blinked, realizing he had indeed been staring at a piece of completely ordinary basalt while his mind wandered to more interesting places. Like literally anywhere else. "I am working. You are dissociating. There is a difference. Thank you, Arya. Your psychological assessments are always welcome and never annoying. Sarcasm is often a defense mechanism against uncomfortable truths. Would you like me to schedule a wellness check?" Marcus set down the basalt with more force than necessary. "I would like you to tell me when the cargo shipment arrives. The one with my completely reasonable and approved request for a companion animal." There was a pause. Arya had been pausing a lot lately, which Marcus found simultaneously amusing and unsettling. According to the technical manual, advanced AI systems were not supposed to need time to formulate responses. They were supposed to process information instantaneously and respond accordingly. But Arya had been alone with Marcus for 7 months, and apparently isolation affected artificial intelligence just as strangely as it affected humans. "The cargo drone entered orbit 14 minutes ago, Arya said finally. "It is currently in landing approach. Estimated touchdown in 6 minutes. I should mention that there are some irregularities in the manifest coding." Marcus was already moving toward the airlock, his heart rate picking up in a way that would have embarrassed him if anyone human had been around to notice. It was just a pet. Probably a cat. Maybe one of those small dogs that were popular on the inner colonies. Something warm and alive that would not analyze his mental state every 15 minutes or judge his career choices. "What kind of irregularities?" he asked, pulling on his environmental suit more out of habit than necessity. The outpost's exterior landing pad was pressurized and climate-controlled, but 7 months of protocol had made the routine automatic. The container classification does not match standard companion animal transport codes. The size is incorrect. The power consumption suggests active cryostasis rather than simple climate control. Marcus stopped halfway through sealing his suit. Cryostasis? For a cat. That would be unusual, yes. I am detecting biosignature readings, but they are not consistent with standard Earth-domesticated species. I recommend caution during container opening. The cargo drone was settling onto the landing pad when Marcus cycled through the airlock, its thrusters kicking up small clouds of lunar dust that glittered in the light of the distant sun. The drone itself was unremarkable, a standard automated transport unit that had made the 3-week journey from the nearest supply depot without human intervention. Its cargo bay doors were already opening, revealing a single container inside. Marcus had been expecting something small. Something manageable. What he saw instead made his stomach drop. The container was a full-sized cryostasis pod, the kind used for long-distance human transport or high-value biological cargo. It sat in the drone's bay like an accusation, its surface still venting cold vapor from the preservation systems. Through the pod's viewing window, Marcus could see frost patterns and shadows but nothing clear. "Arya, pull up the shipping manifest. Full details." The data scrolled across his suit's heads-up display while he approached the pod. Item classification: exotic livestock. Subcategory: domesticated variant. Species: Valen, subtype Epsilon. Handling instructions: minimal contact, maintain feeding schedule, exercise not required. There were serial numbers and tracking codes and a price listing that made Marcus's throat tight. At the bottom, in the section usually reserved for livestock descriptions, 3 words stood out: mostly docile. Broken. Marcus's hands trembled as he reached for the pod's manual release controls. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. The coding, the classification, the casual cruelty of that single word. Broken. The seals hissed as he initiated the opening sequence. More vapor poured out, obscuring his view, and for a long moment Marcus could not see anything inside the pod's interior. His mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. What kind of living thing required cryostasis? What kind of creature got shipped as livestock with a price tag? Then the vapor cleared. A woman stared back at him. She was curled into the smallest possible space, her body compressed into a defensive ball that spoke of long practice and learned helplessness. Her skin was pale, not the healthy pale of someone who avoided sun, but the translucent pale of someone who had not seen natural light in a very long time. It had a faint violet tint, subtle enough that Marcus almost missed it. Her hair was silver, not gray with age but genuinely metallic silver, and it fell in tangled sheets around her face and shoulders. But what stopped Marcus's breath, what made his brain stutter over impossible observations, were the details that marked her as distinctly not human. Her ears swept back from her skull in elegant tapered points. Her eyes were too large, pupils dilated in the pod's dim interior, and they held a depth of color that seemed to shift between violet and deep blue. And when she drew back her lips in what might have been fear or warning, he saw fangs. Delicate but unmistakable, designed for a purpose his mind did not want to consider. She looked at him with eyes that had given up on hope. "Oh God," Marcus breathed. "Arya, get me every detail on the shipping company. Every person who touched this transport. Every signature on every form." "Marcus, what are you seeing?" "Someone shipped a person." His voice came out flat, shocked. "Someone packaged a sentient being and sent her to me because I requested a pet." The woman in the pod had not moved. She watched him with that same terrible stillness, her chest barely rising with shallow breaths. She wore something that might have been a thermal blanket once, torn and inadequate, and Marcus could see scars on the visible parts of her skin. Old scars. New scars. A history written in damage. "The manifest lists her as Valen species," Arya said quietly. "Cross-referencing available databases. The Valen are a recognized sentient species from the Outer Reach colonies. They are bipedal, humanoid, and possess advanced cognitive functions equivalent to human baseline. They are also listed as endangered due to colony collapse events approximately 8 years ago. Marcus, this is illegal on 17 different levels." Marcus reached for the pod's interior restraints, the magnetic locks that would fully release her from the container. The woman flinched so violently she struck her head against the pod's padded interior. The sound of impact made Marcus freeze, his hands suspended in midair. "I am not going to hurt you," he said softly, keeping his voice as gentle as possible. "I'm going to help you out of there. Is that okay?" She did not respond. Did not nod or shake her head or give any indication that she understood him. She simply stared with those enormous eyes, waiting for violence she clearly expected. Marcus moved slowly, telegraphing every motion. He disengaged the magnetic restraints one at a time, giving her ample opportunity to move if she wanted. When the last lock released, she remained frozen in place. "You can come out whenever you are ready," Marcus said. "There is no rush. I am going to step back now and give you space." He retreated 3 steps, then sat down on the landing pad's deck plating. It was an awkward position, undignified and vulnerable, but it put him at a lower height than her and removed any sense of looming threat. The woman watched this maneuver with what might have been confusion. "My name is Marcus Webb," he continued, keeping his tone conversational. "This is Mining Outpost Sigma 9. You were sent here by mistake. A very serious, very illegal mistake. I requested a companion animal and someone decided that meant you. Which is insane and criminal, and I am so sorry." Still no response. Marcus could see her processing his words, her eyes tracking his movements, but she remained compressed in that defensive position. "I have sent a priority message to Colonial Authority," Arya added, her voice gentle through the external speakers. "Full report of the situation. They should respond within 12 days. 12 days. Nearly 2 weeks before anyone official even knew what had happened. Marcus felt the weight of that timeline settle over him. This woman, this person who had been trafficked and shipped like cargo, was now his responsibility. Her safety, her well-being, her recovery from whatever hell she had endured, all of it rested on a geologist who had been alone so long he argued with his coffee maker. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked. "Do you need medical attention?" The woman's eyes flickered to the outpost's main structure, then back to Marcus. She was calculating something, weighing options he could not guess. "The outpost has a full medical bay," he continued. "Food, water, climate control. Private quarters. Whatever you need, we have it or we can make it. You are safe here. I promise you are safe." Promises from strangers probably meant nothing to her. Marcus could see that in her expression, the weary knowledge that words were cheap and actions were what mattered. He stood slowly, keeping his movements careful. "I am going to go inside now," he said. "The airlock will remain open. You can come in whenever you want or you can stay out here. It is your choice. But it gets very cold on this moon during the dark cycle, and that starts in about 3 hours. So I recommend coming inside before then." He walked away without looking back, every instinct screaming at him to stay and help and fix this somehow. But she needed space more than she needed his presence. She needed to understand that she could make choices. Inside the airlock, Marcus waited. Through the external cameras, he watched her remain in the pod for nearly 20 minutes. Then, slowly, she unfolded herself from that compressed position. Her movements were stiff, painful. She looked around the landing pad, taking in the barren lunar landscape and the distant gas giant. Then she looked at the open airlock. Marcus held his breath. She moved like someone expecting traps at every step. Her feet touched the landing pad deck and she swayed, catching herself against the pod. How long had she been in cryostasis? How long since she had used her legs? It took her another 10 minutes to reach the airlock. She paused at the threshold, staring at the interior as if it might suddenly become a cage. Marcus had deliberately moved away from the airlock's interior camera view, giving her privacy to decide. Finally, she crossed the threshold. Marcus exhaled. "Arya, prepare the guest quarters. Full privacy locks, user-controlled from the inside only. Set the temperature 2 degrees cooler than standard, and make sure there is plenty of water and basic nutrition available. The guest quarters are not equipped for long-term habitation. Then prepare my quarters. I will take the workshop cot. Marcus, you need proper rest facilities. Arya, a person was just delivered to me in a cryopod with a price tag. I think I can handle sleeping on a cot for a while. Prioritize her comfort and safety above everything else." Through the internal cameras, Marcus watched the woman enter the main habitat module. She moved along the walls, keeping her back protected, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. When she reached the common area, she stopped, staring at the normal domestic space with something like bewilderment. Marcus stepped into view slowly, keeping his hands visible. "The quarters at the end of the hall are yours. Private bathroom, climate controls, door locks from the inside. I have put some clean clothes in there, though they will probably not fit well. And there is food and water. Not great food, but food." She looked at him without speaking. Up close, in proper lighting, Marcus could see more details. The scars were worse than he had thought. Her hands trembled with a fine tremor that never quite stopped. She was severely underweight, her frame suggesting she should be substantially more robust than her current condition. "Do you understand me?" Marcus asked gently. "Do you speak standard?" The woman's jaw tightened. Then, barely audible, she spoke. Her voice was rough and used, but the words were clear. "I understand." Marcus felt relief wash through him. Communication was possible. That was something. "Good. That is good. Do you have a name you want to share?" A long pause. Then, "Lyra." "Lyra. Okay. It is good to meet you, Lyra, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Marcus gestured toward the hallway. "Your quarters are ready whenever you want them. Take all the time you need. I will be in the lab if you need anything. Just tell Arya and she will find me." Lyra looked at the hallway, then back at Marcus. Her expression held suspicion and exhaustion in equal measure. Without another word, she moved past him, staying as far away as the corridor allowed, and disappeared into the guest quarters. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss. Marcus stood in the empty common area and tried to process what had just happened. He had requested a pet. Someone had sent him a traumatized person. His quiet, lonely posting had just become something infinitely more complicated. "Arya, I need you to compile everything. Every law they broke, every regulation they violated, every person responsible. Build me a case that will bury the people who did this. Already in progress. Marcus, you should know that interfering with livestock transport can void your employment contract." "I do not care about my contract. A person was shipped like cargo. Nothing else matters compared to that. Agreed. I am also searching for information on Valen biology and cultural practices. We need to understand her needs if we are going to help her properly. Marcus nodded, his mind already racing ahead to the challenges they faced. 12 days until colonial authority responded. Weeks or months until any real help arrived. In the meantime, he had to figure out how to care for someone who had every reason not to trust him. In her quarters, Lyra sat with her back against the wall farthest from the door, watching the lock mechanism and waiting for it to fail. Waiting for the humans' promises to reveal themselves as lies. Because that was how these things worked. Kindness was just cruelty with better timing. But the lock held. The door stayed closed. And slowly, carefully, Lyra allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time might be different. Finding humanity. The first 3 days passed in careful silence. Lyra remained in her quarters, emerging only when she was certain Marcus was elsewhere in the outpost. She moved like a ghost through the habitat modules, learning the layout with the practiced efficiency of someone who had survived by understanding her cages. The medical bay with its diagnostic equipment and synthetic blood reserves that made her stomach clench with complicated feelings. The greenhouse where vegetables grew under artificial sunlight, the air thick and humid and nothing like the recycled sterility she had grown accustomed to. The lab where Marcus spent most of his time, surrounded by rock samples and data screens that meant nothing to her. She learned his patterns. Morning checks of the atmospheric processors, always accompanied by muttered complaints about calibration drift. Afternoons in the lab, analyzing samples with a focus that suggested he genuinely cared about rocks. Evenings in the common area, where he ate meals that looked uniformly unappetizing and read aloud from research journals in a voice that carried through the habitat's ventilation system. He never searched for her. Never demanded her presence. Never even asked Arya where she was, though Lyra knew the AI tracked her movements through biometric sensors embedded throughout the outpost. Marcus simply existed in his space, narrating his activities like he was providing an audio guide for an absent audience. Currently attempting to convince the water recycler that it should, in fact, recycle water, his voice drifted through the vents on the third day. It has philosophical objections to this purpose. Arya suggests percussive maintenance. I suggest Arya does not understand the delicate nature of equipment that keeps us from dying of dehydration. Percussive maintenance is a time-honored human tradition, Arya replied with what sounded like amusement. Hitting things until they work is not a tradition. It is desperation with a manual. Lyra found herself listening to these exchanges despite herself. They were absurd. Comfortable. Nothing like the tense silence of captivity or the false cheerfulness of facility managers who spoke in soothing tones while reviewing profit margins on sentient cargo. On the fourth day, hunger drove her out during Marcus's waking hours. She had been rationing the nutrition bars he had left in her quarters, but her body's needs were becoming impossible to ignore. The Valen required specific proteins, certain minerals, and while human food could sustain her temporarily, she would eventually need what her species had always needed. Blood. The thought made her sick. Not because of the substance itself but because of what it meant. What she was. What humans thought she was. Monster. Vampire. Predator. She had heard all the terms during processing, spoken with disgust or fascination or cold clinical detachment. She entered the common area to find Marcus eating something that might have been pasta, might have been an experiment in applied chemistry. He looked up when she appeared and carefully set down his fork. "Hi," he said, his voice carrying the same gentle tone he always used. "There is more if you want it. Fair warning though, it tastes like regret and poor life choices." "Your cooking has not improved," Arya observed. "My cooking is functional. Not everything needs to be a culinary masterpiece." Lyra stood in the doorway, her body tense with conflict. She should retreat. Should maintain her distance. But her stomach was cramping and her hands were shaking worse than usual, and she was so tired of being afraid. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Marcus's expression shifted to immediate attention. "Okay. I am listening. My species requires certain nutrients that human food cannot provide indefinitely." The words came out flat, rehearsed. She had prepared this explanation during the long hours alone, knowing it would eventually be necessary. "We need hemoglobin-based proteins. Fresh sources are optimal, but synthesized alternatives work for maintenance." She watched his face, waiting for the revulsion. The fear. The moment when he would realize what he had allowed into his outpost. Marcus nodded slowly. "You need blood." "Yes." "Okay. The medical bay has synthetic blood products for transfusions. Will those work?" Lyra blinked. That was it? No accusations? No horror? You are not disturbed? Disturbed? Lyra, humans drink cow's milk and eat insect protein and consume all kinds of things that other species find weird. Your biology is your biology. There is nothing disturbing about nutritional requirements. He stood up, moving toward the medical bay. Come on. Let's see what we have in storage. She followed hesitantly, her mind struggling to process his casual acceptance. The medical bay was small but well-equipped, designed to handle emergencies for solo postings. Marcus pulled up the inventory on a wall screen. We have O-negative synthetic, AB synthetic, and something labeled universal substrate base. I have no idea what that last one means, but it sounds science-y and versatile. He glanced at her. What works best for Valen physiology? I do not know. The admission felt like failure. In the facilities they gave us supplements. Processed compounds. I do not know what they contained. Marcus's jaw tightened briefly, the first sign of real anger she had seen from him. But when he spoke, his voice remained steady. Okay, we will figure it out. Arya, pull up everything we have on Valen nutritional requirements. Database access is limited, Arya replied. The Valen colony collapse resulted in significant information loss. However, I am finding references in xenobiology journals. Cross-referencing now. While Arya searched, Marcus examined the medical fabricator, a sophisticated piece of equipment that could synthesize various medical compounds from base materials. Even if the stored blood products do not work perfectly, we can use this to create custom supplements. It will take some trial and error, but we will find something that works. Why are you helping me? Lyra asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Marcus looked at her with an expression of genuine confusion. Why would I not help you? You are a person who needs assistance. That is pretty straightforward. I was sent here as property. As livestock. You could have sent me back. Claimed the shipment was wrong and requested what you actually ordered. I could have, Marcus agreed. But that would make me complicit in trafficking. It would mean accepting that what happened to you was somehow acceptable. And I have spent 7 months alone on this rock talking to an AI about rocks and my terrible cooking, so clearly my decision-making is questionable, but I like to think I still know the difference between right and wrong. He turned back to the fabricator. Besides, you are much better company than a cat would be. You do not knock things off tables or vomit in my boots. Despite everything, despite the fear and trauma and learned helplessness, Lyra felt her mouth twitch. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. Over the next week they developed a routine. Marcus worked with the medical fabricator to create synthetic supplements that met Lyra's nutritional needs. The first few attempts were failures, compounds that her body rejected violently. But he persisted with the patience of someone accustomed to solving problems through iteration. By the 10th day he had created a supplement that worked. Not perfect, not as good as what her body truly needed, but sufficient to keep her healthy. I am calling it Formula Epsilon, Marcus announced, presenting her with a sealed container of dark red liquid. Because it is the 5th version and I have run out of creative naming conventions. Lyra accepted the container carefully. You spent 4 days on this. I spent 4 days figuring out how to keep you from starving. Time well invested. He paused. Although Arya has informed me that my actual research has fallen significantly behind schedule. Apparently the mining consortium paying for this outpost expects me to analyze rocks, not play biochemist. Perhaps you should focus on your work. I can manage. Lyra, you are work that actually matters. The rocks will still be here tomorrow. You needed help today. Something in Lyra's chest twisted at those words. She had not been prioritized in years. Had not been treated as something that mattered beyond her market value. The feeling was uncomfortable and warming in equal measure. She drank the supplement. It tasted metallic and wrong, but her body accepted it gratefully. Within hours, the constant tremor in her hands began to ease. Her vision cleared. The persistent ache in her bones faded. For the first time since the colony fell, she felt almost normal. That night, she joined Marcus for dinner in the common area. Not hiding. Not watching from doorways. Actually sitting at the table while he ate something he claimed was vegetable curry but looked more like a science experiment gone wrong. Tell me about your work, she said, surprising herself with the request. Marcus looked up from his plate, clearly startled. My work? It is incredibly boring. I analyze geological samples to map mineral deposits. The mining consortium uses the data to determine where to set up extraction operations. Lots of spectroscopy and density measurements and really tedious cataloging. You like it though? I can hear it in your voice when you talk to Arya about the samples. He smiled, a genuine expression that made him look younger. I do actually. There is something satisfying about understanding how a moon formed, what processes created its current geology. Every rock tells a story about billions of years of cosmic events. It is like archaeology but for planets. He paused. What did you do? Before? Lyra's hands tightened on her cup. I was a systems engineer. On Nyx Tertius before the colony collapsed. I maintained atmospheric processors, water recyclers, power distribution networks. Everything that kept people alive. That is impressive. Those are complex systems. They were necessary. Nyx Tertius was a harsh world. If the systems failed, people died. So we learned to keep them running. Her voice grew distant. When the blight hit the food processors, everything fell apart. The colony could not sustain itself. The corporation that sponsored us declared bankruptcy and abandoned the settlement. We were stranded with no supplies and no way off-world. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression intent. The traffickers came 3 months after the last supply ship, Lyra continued. They offered rescue. Transportation to other colonies where we could find work and start over. Half the remaining population accepted. We thought we were being saved. She laughed, a bitter sound. We were being collected. Processed. Categorized by species, age, health status. The Valen were considered exotic. Rare. Valuable for certain markets. I am so sorry that happened to you. Sorry does not change what was done. No, Marcus agreed quietly. But maybe acknowledgement matters anyway. What happened to you was wrong. You deserved better. Your whole colony deserved better. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of shared understanding filling the space between them. Finally, Lyra spoke again. The moisture regulator in Section 3 is failing. I heard it cycling incorrectly this morning. Marcus blinked at the subject change. Really? I thought I fixed that last week. You adjusted the pressure valve, but the core filter needs replacement. The system is compensating, but it will fail completely within 3 days. How do you know that? I told you. I was a systems engineer. I know what failing equipment sounds like. She met his eyes. I could fix it if you have replacement filters. Marcus's face lit up with something like hope. We have filters in the maintenance storage. But Lyra, you do not have to work. This is not a condition of you staying here. I know. But I am going insane with nothing to do. Let me help. And so they fixed the moisture regulator together, Lyra's expertise making the repair quick and efficient. Marcus watched her work with obvious admiration, handing her tools and learning her methods. When they finished, the system hummed with perfect efficiency. You are brilliant, Marcus said simply. Lyra felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. When had she last been valued for her skills rather than her species? The message arrived on day 12 just as Arya had predicted. Colonial Authority responding to Marcus's initial report. Lyra was in the greenhouse when Arya announced the incoming transmission, and she felt her blood turn cold. Marcus read the message in the command center, his expression growing darker with each line. Lyra stood in the doorway watching him, preparing herself for whatever judgment had been decided. They are launching an investigation, Marcus said finally. Full audit of the shipping company and everyone involved in your transport. They want your testimony, medical records, everything we can provide. He looked up at her. They are also asking what you want to do, where you want to go. They can arrange transport to any colony with a Valen population, or provide resettlement assistance somewhere else. What about the people who did this? They will face charges. Trafficking sentient beings is a serious crime. If convicted, they are looking at decades in prison. Lyra absorbed this information slowly. Justice. Real consequences. It felt surreal. There is something else, Marcus continued, his voice careful. The shipping company is demanding you be returned to their custody pending investigation. They claim you are evidence in a potential civil case. They have lawyers arguing that I violated protocols by removing you from the transport container without authorization. Will you send me back? Not a chance in hell. Marcus's voice was fierce. I already sent my response. I told them the transport container was damaged during landing and you had to be removed for safety reasons. The container then suffered a catastrophic systems failure and was destroyed. Tragic accident. Completely unforeseeable. You are lying for me. I am protecting you. There is a difference. He stood up, moving closer but maintaining respectful distance. Lyra, I know I am just some geologist on a mining outpost. I have no authority and limited resources. But I can promise you this. No one is taking you anywhere you do not want to go. Not the shipping company, not their lawyers, not anyone. You have choices now. Real choices. And I will do everything I can to make sure you get to make them. Lyra stared at this human who had turned his life upside down for a stranger. Who had sacrificed his time, his resources, his career prospects to help someone he owed nothing. Who looked at her and saw a person worth protecting. I want to stay, she heard herself say. Here. On Sigma 9. With you. Marcus's eyes widened. Stay? Lyra, this outpost is incredibly isolated. There is nothing here but rocks and bad food and an AI with boundary issues. I resent that characterization, Arya interjected. You literally monitor my sleep patterns and provide unsolicited commentary. That is called caring, Marcus? Lyra smiled, a real smile this time. I know what is here. I have been here for almost 2 weeks. And it is better than anywhere else I have been in 5 years. You treat me like a person. You respect my choices. You make terrible food and argue with your computer and stay up too late analyzing rocks that probably do not matter to anyone but you. They matter, Marcus protested weakly. The point is you are good. Genuinely good. And I do not want to leave that. She took a breath. Also, your outpost systems are running at approximately 70% efficiency. You need an engineer. I need work that matters. It seems mutually beneficial. Marcus laughed, a surprised sound full of relief and joy. Are you negotiating to be my research partner? I am negotiating to be a person who lives here and helps maintain the systems and possibly teaches you to cook something that does not make Arya concerned for your health. That seems fair. They stood smiling at each other like idiots, and Lyra felt something she had not experienced in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope for a future that might not be defined by survival. I will need to file amended reports, Marcus said. Change your status from trafficking victim to research partner. Get you proper credentials and access to outpost systems. It might take a few weeks to process. I can wait. I am good at waiting. Over the following months, Sigma 9 transformed. Lyra repaired systems Marcus had not even realized were failing. She optimized power distribution, improved the greenhouse yields, and completely redesigned the water recycling system to operate at 98% efficiency. Marcus taught her about geology, sharing his enthusiasm for rocks until she began to understand why he found them fascinating. They developed a cooking rotation where Lyra made actual food and Marcus contributed what Arya generously called effort. They talked about everything and nothing. About their pasts and their hopes. About the unfairness of the universe and the small victories that made life bearable. Marcus told her about Earth, about family he rarely contacted, about choosing isolation because connection felt too difficult after loss. Lyra shared fragments of Nyx Tertius, of her people's culture and the community that had been destroyed. She showed him the small rituals that Valen used to mark time and celebrate survival. We have a saying, she told him one evening while they worked together in the lab. Vyxera Kef. It means light persists or the light continues. We used to say it during the dark seasons on Nyx Tertius, when the sun would not rise for months. A reminder that darkness is temporary. I like that, Marcus said softly. Vyxera Kef. His pronunciation was terrible, but Lyra smiled anyway. 6 months after her arrival, colonial authorities sent final confirmation. The trafficking network had been dismantled. 17 people arrested. 4 corporations dissolved. Lyra's testimony, delivered via secure transmission, had been instrumental in the prosecution. She was officially listed as a survivor, not as property. Her status as Marcus's research partner was confirmed, complete with salary and benefits. You are now officially employed by the mining consortium, Marcus announced, reading the message. Welcome to the thrilling world of geological analysis and questionable cafeteria supplies. We do not have a cafeteria. Exactly. That is how questionable it is. Lyra laughed, the sound coming easier now. She had laughed more in the past 6 months than in the previous 5 years combined. That night, they stood together in the observation dome, watching the gas giant rotate slowly against the backdrop of stars. The view was objectively beautiful, all swirling colors and cosmic majesty. But what made it special was sharing it with someone who understood. Thank you, Lyra said quietly. For seeing me as a person when it would have been easier not to. For fighting for me. For giving me a home. Marcus shook his head. You gave me something too. Before you arrived, I was just existing here. Going through motions. You reminded me what it means to connect with someone. To care about something beyond my work. You made this outpost feel like home instead of exile. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who had been broken by different circumstances, finding healing in unexpected partnership. Vuexera Keth, Lyra whispered. The light continues, Marcus agreed. And on a small mining outpost orbiting a dead moon, in the space between what was and what could be, two survivors built something new. Not a replacement for what they had lost, but something uniquely theirs. A partnership. A friendship. A home. The stars witnessed their quiet revolution, and the universe, indifferent to suffering but accommodating of hope, allowed them this small victory. Sometimes rescue comes from unlikely sources. Sometimes healing begins with a single act of kindness. Sometimes home is wherever someone sees you and chooses to stay.